told you there's a motorcycle from 1948 that could outrun Ferraris built 20 years later. A machine so advanced that when it appeared at the Earl's Court Motorcycle Show in London, seasoned engineers literally couldn't believe what they were seeing. This is the story of the Vincent Black Shadow, a motorcycle that didn't just break records, it broke reality. Picture this. It's post-war Britain. Food is still rationed. Most motorcycles struggle to hit 70 miles per hour. Then Philip Vincent and Phil Irving unveil a machine painted entirely in black, engine and all, that could touch 125 miles per hour straight from the factory floor. In 1948, that wasn't just fast. That was approaching the land speed records of purpose-built racing machines. Except this wasn't a racer. You could ride it to work on Monday and set a speed record on Sunday. The Vincent Black Shadow wasn't just another motorcycle. It was the world's first superbike, a term that wouldn't even exist for another 2 decades. This machine pioneered engineering solutions that manufacturers are still using today, wrapped them in an aesthetic that looked like it rolled out of hell itself, and delivered performance numbers that wouldn't be matched by production motorcycles for almost 20 years. But here's the thing. Vincent only made about 1,100 of them before the company went under. Today, finding one is like finding the holy grail of motorcycling, and there's a reason collectors will pay over $100,000 for a good example. To understand why the Black Shadow was so revolutionary, we need to travel back to 1946. Philip Conrad Vincent had been building motorcycles since 1928, but the war had stopped everything. While other manufacturers were content to dust off their pre-war designs and get back to business, Vincent had spent those years thinking. He'd been corresponding with his chief engineer Phil Irving, yes, 2 Phils, who was stuck in Australia during the war. Together, through letters that took months to arrive, they designed what would become the most advanced motorcycle engine the world had ever seen. The motorcycle industry in 1946 was conservative. Most bikes used single-cylinder engines making 20 to 30 horsepower. The fast ones might hit 85 miles per hour on a good day with a tailwind. Harley-Davidson's top model made 45 horsepower from 1200C. Indian's Chief made similar power from the same displacement. These were considered the pinnacle of motorcycle performance. The British manufacturers, Triumph, Norton, BSA, they were building lighter, nimbler machines, but nothing that could touch the Americans for raw power. Or so everyone thought. Vincent looked at this landscape and saw opportunity. But more than that, he saw that everyone was building motorcycles wrong. They were using separate engines bolted into frames, adding weight and complexity. They were using ancient suspension designs that hadn't changed since the 1920s. They were accepting that motorcycles had to vibrate, had to leak oil, had to be temperamental. Vincent and Irving decided to question every single assumption about motorcycle design. The result would be beautiful, terrifying, and absolutely brilliant. The heart of the Black Shadow was its engine, a 908cc 50-degree V-twin that produced 55 horsepower at 5,700 RPM. Now, 55 horsepower might not sound impressive today when a modern Hayabusa makes over 190, but let me put that in perspective. The Shadow's engine was smaller than a Harley's, but made 22% more power. It weighed less than most 500cc engines of the era, but produced double their output. The specific output, horsepower per liter, was 55 per liter. Most performance cars of the era struggled to achieve 40. But the real genius wasn't just the power, it was how they achieved it. Every Black Shadow engine was hand-assembled. Not hand-assembled like modern limited editions where someone torques the bolts by hand instead of machine. I mean, each engine was individually blueprinted. The mechanics would measure every single component, pistons, rods, valves, everything, and match them for perfect balance and clearance. The ports were hand-polished to mirror finish. The combustion chambers were matched to within half a cc. This wasn't mass production. This was watchmaking applied to motorcycle engines. The engine used a dry sump lubrication system, technology borrowed from aircraft engines. Instead of oil sloshing around in the bottom of the engine, it was stored in a separate tank and pumped through under pressure. This meant the engine could rev higher without oil starvation, run cooler, and sit lower in the frame. Most manufacturers wouldn't adopt dry sump systems for road bikes until the 1980s. Vincent was doing it in 1948. The valve gear was equally advanced. Twin camshafts mounted high in the engine, not quite overhead cams, but close enough to minimize valve train mass. The valves themselves were massive for the era, flowing air like nothing else on the road. The compression ratio was 7.3.1, which sounds low today, but remember, this was the era of 70-octane fuel. Most bikes ran 6.1 compression. That extra compression meant more power, but also meant the Shadow needed premium fuel. What passed for premium in 1948 anyway. Here's where it gets really interesting. Vincent didn't just build a powerful engine and stick it in a conventional frame. They threw out the frame entirely. The engine itself became the frame. The cylinder heads were cast with mounting points for the rear suspension. The crankcase had attachment points for the steering head. This wasn't just clever packaging, it was revolutionary. By eliminating the frame's down tube and using the engine as a stressed member, they saved nearly 50 pounds. In an era when motorcycles were approaching 600 pounds, the Black Shadow weighed just 458. But wait, there's more. The front suspension used something called a hydraulic fork. Instead of telescopic forks, like modern bikes, which were just starting to appear in 1948, Vincent used a girder fork with hydraulic damping. The design looked like it belonged on a motorcycle from 1920, but the engineering was pure space age. The fork had built-in anti-dive geometry. When you hit the brakes, the suspension wouldn't compress and throw your weight forward. BMW wouldn't invent this technology until the 1980s. The rear suspension was equally clever. Vincent used a cantilever design with a triangulated swing arm and dual spring units mounted under the seat. The springs were adjustable for preload and damping, unheard of in 1948. You could set the bike up for solo riding, two-up touring, or even sidecar work. Speaking of sidecars, the rear wheel was reversible. You could flip it around to change the final drive ratio, or swap sides for sidecar duty. The engineering was so thorough, it's almost obsessive. Now let's talk about stopping, because going fast is only half the equation. The Black Shadow had two 7-inch drum brakes on each wheel. Not one drum, two mounted side by side. Each drum had its own set of shoes, its own actuation, its own adjustment. The front brake alone had more stopping power than most complete motorcycles of the era. The rear brake was equally powerful. In testing, the Shadow could stop from 60 miles per hour in under 150 feet. A modern sport bike with disc brakes does it in about 120 feet. For 1948 technology, those are absolutely staggering numbers. The transmission was a 4-speed unit at a time when most bikes made do with 3. The gear ratios were perfectly spaced for both acceleration and top speed. First gear was low enough for gentle pullaways in traffic. Fourth gear was tall enough for sustained high-speed cruising. The clutch was a multi-plate unit running in oil, smooth, progressive, and virtually unbreakable. The whole transmission was so robust that racers would later use it behind engines, making 3 times the stock horsepower. So, what was it like to actually ride this thing? Contemporary reports describe it as both exhilarating and terrifying. The acceleration was unlike anything else on the road. Motorcycle Sport magazine tested one in 1948 and recorded 0 to 60 miles per hour in 6.0 seconds. The quarter mile fell in 13.6 seconds at 102 miles per hour. These numbers wouldn't be matched by another production motorcycle until Honda's CB750 arrived in 1969, 21 years later. But it wasn't just straight line speed. The Shadow handled too. That hydraulic fork and cantilever rear suspension gave it a planted, stable feel at speed. The low center of gravity from the unit construction meant it could carve corners with precision. The brakes meant you could actually use all that speed without ending up in a hedge. Riders reported that the faster you went, the better the Shadow felt. It was happiest north of 80 miles per hour, coincidentally where every other motorcycle of the era started feeling decidedly unhappy. The Black Shadow's aesthetic was as radical as its engineering. Vincent painted everything black. Not just the bodywork, the engine, the cases, the cylinders, everything except the exhaust pipes and the polished aluminum of the carburetors. This was unheard of. Motorcycles had chrome engines, polished cases, bright colors. The Shadow looked like it had been forged in darkness. The minimal bodywork, just a fuel tank and a seat, and emphasized the mechanical beauty of the engine. You could see everything: the massive cylinders, the external oil lines, the mechanical precision. It was intimidating and gorgeous in equal measure. The speedometer went to 150 miles per hour. Think about that. In 1948, having a Speedo that read to 150 was like having one that reads to 250 today. It was a statement of intent. And unlike modern bikes with optimistic speedometers, the Shadow could actually approach those numbers. George Brown, a Vincent employee, took a specially prepared Shadow to 150.313 miles per hour at Bonneville in 1948. This was a barely modified road bike competing against purpose-built streamliners. Production of the Black Shadow was never large-scale. Vincent was a small company, building motorcycles by hand in Stevenage, England. Each Shadow took weeks to complete. The engine assembly alone could take days with all the hand fitting and matching. The price reflected this. A Black Shadow cost $400 in 1948, about $15,000 in today's money. That was more than twice the price of most other motorcycles and approaching the cost of a small car. Between 1948 and 1955, Vincent produced approximately 1,700 Black Shadows. Each one was slightly different, reflecting running changes and improvements. Early bikes had the bronze cylinder heads. Later ones used aluminum. The fork design evolved. The brake drums got larger, but the basic formula never changed. Massive power, innovative engineering, uncompromising performance. The Shadow attracted a particular type of rider. These weren't casual motorcyclists. Shadow owners included speed freaks, engineers, and people who simply had to have the best. Famous owners included Hunter S. Thompson, who wrote extensively about his Shadow, calling it a Vincent Black Shadow, which is like owning a flying bomb. Richard Thompson immortalized it in song. Jay Leno has two in his collection. Racing success followed inevitably. Shadows dominated sprints and hill climbs. They set speed records that stood for decades. Raleigh Free famously set a motorcycle speed record of 150.313 miles per hour on a Shadow at Bonneville, lying flat on the bike wearing nothing but a bathing suit and sneakers to reduce wind resistance. The image became one of the most iconic in motorcycling history. The bike underneath him was essentially stock except for the removal of unnecessary parts and a tuning session. But here's the tragedy. Despite building arguably the best motorcycle in the world, Vincent couldn't make money. The hand, assembly, the over-engineering, the limited production, it all cost too much. They tried building a cheaper model, the Comet, but it wasn't enough. In 1955, Philip Vincent announced the company would cease motorcycle production. The last Black Shadow rolled off the line in December 1955. Vincent tried making industrial engines for a while, but the magic was gone. The company that built the world's fastest motorcycle simply disappeared. The end of production transformed the Black Shadow from a motorcycle into a legend. Values started climbing immediately. Riders who had bought them new refused to sell. When bikes did change hands, prices climbed steadily. By the 1970s, a good Shadow cost more than a new car. Today, pristine examples sell for over $100,000. The auction record is $920,000 for a particularly special example. But the Shadow's influence extended far beyond its production run. The concept of the superbike, or a motorcycle with racetrack performance and street manners, started here. The engineering solutions Vincent pioneered became industry standard. Unit construction, where the engine and gearbox share cases, Vincent did it first. Adjustable suspension, Vincent. Massive brakes, Vincent. Even the blacked-out aesthetic would return decades later with modern naked bikes and cafe racers. Modern manufacturers still study the Black Shadow. When Honda was developing the original CBR 900RR, engineers had a Shadow in the workshop for reference. When Confederate motorcycles wanted to build the ultimate American V-twin, they looked to Vincent for inspiration, not Harley. The Shadow proved that motorcycles didn't have to be crude, didn't have to be slow, didn't have to compromise. The technical legacy is equally important. The Black Shadow proved that meticulous assembly and quality control could dramatically improve performance. It showed that motorcycles could be both fast and reliable. It demonstrated that innovative engineering could overcome the limitations of existing technology. Every modern superbike owes something to the Black Shadow's philosophy of uncompromising performance. What makes the Black Shadow arguably the greatest motorcycle ever built isn't just its speed or its engineering. It's the complete package. The combination of revolutionary design, meticulous construction, stunning performance, and striking aesthetics created something that transcended mere transportation. The Shadow was a statement about what was possible when engineers were allowed to pursue perfection without compromise. Consider what Vincent achieved. In 1948, with slide rules and drafting boards, they created a motorcycle that could outperform machines built decades later with computer-aided design and modern materials. They did it with cast iron, steel, and aluminum. No carbon fiber, no computer-controlled fuel injection, no traction control or ABS, just pure mechanical engineering executed to perfection. The Black Shadow also represents something we've lost in modern motorcycling. Today's bikes are faster, more reliable, more refined. A modern Kawasaki Ninja H2 would leave a Black Shadow for dead in any performance metric. But the H2 is built by robots in a factory. The Shadow was built by craftsmen who knew that this particular engine, this specific motorcycle, had their fingerprints on it. That personal connection, that human touch, that's something mass production can never replicate. There's a philosophical element too. The Black Shadow appeared at a turning point in history. The world was rebuilding after the most destructive war ever fought. Technology that had been used for destruction was being repurposed for civilian use. The Shadow represented hope that engineering excellence could create beauty, not just bombs. That speed and power could be enjoyed, not just weaponized. That the future could be better than the past. Today, surviving Black Shadows are treated like religious artifacts. Owners speak of them in hushed tones. Restorers spend years tracking down correct parts. The Vincent Owners Club maintains detailed records of every known bike. When a Shadow appears at a motorcycle show, everything else becomes background. Even people who know nothing about motorcycles can sense they're looking at something special. The mythology surrounding the Black Shadow continues to grow. Stories of their performance become more elaborate with each telling. But here's the thing, the reality is impressive enough. This was a motorcycle that could cruise at 100 miles per hour all day long. When most cars struggled to maintain 60, it could accelerate like a racing bike, but idle in traffic without overheating. It could tour continents or win races with equal ease. Modern technology has made the Black Shadow's performance accessible to anyone with $10,000 and a motorcycle license. But it hasn't replicated the Shadow's significance. This wasn't just a fast motorcycle, it was a paradigm shift. It proved that motorcycles could be primary transportation, not just toys. It showed that 2 wheels could be faster than 4. It demonstrated that British engineering could compete with anyone in the world. The Black Shadow asks us to reconsider what makes something great. Is it just performance numbers? Is it innovation? Is it influence? Is it rarity? The Shadow has all of these, but it has something more. Soul. Every Shadow has a personality, quirks that make it unique. They require understanding, mechanical sympathy, respect. You don't just ride a Black Shadow, you form a relationship with it. In our current era of electronic everything, the Black Shadow reminds us of what pure mechanical engineering can achieve. No computer decides when to shift or how much power to deliver. No sensors intervene if you're ham-fisted with the throttle. It's just you, the machine, and physics. That directness, that purity of experience, that's something we've largely lost in the pursuit of ever higher performance and ever greater safety. The Vincent Black Shadow stands as perhaps the greatest motorcycle ever built, not because it was perfect, but because it was perfectly conceived. Philip Vincent and Phil Irving didn't set out to build a motorcycle that would last forever or sell in huge numbers. They set out to build the best motorcycle possible with the technology available. They succeeded so completely that nearly 80 years later, we're still talking about it, still studying it, still learning from it. When you look at a Black Shadow today, you're not just looking at an old motorcycle. You're looking at ambition made metal, dreams cast in aluminum and steel. You're seeing what happens when engineers are allowed to pursue excellence without compromise. You're witnessing the birth of the superbike, the moment motorcycles stopped being just transportation and became something more. The Black Shadow proved that a motorcycle could be art, engineering, and adrenaline all at once. It showed that pushing boundaries wasn't just about going faster, it was about reimagining what was possible. Every time a modern manufacturer claims to have built the ultimate motorcycle, the Black Shadow sits in museums and collections around the world, silently reminding us that ultimate performance isn't just about numbers. It's about vision, courage, and the relentless pursuit of perfection. That's the legacy of the Vincent Black Shadow. Not just that it was fast, though it certainly was. Not just that it was innovative, though it pioneered technologies we still use today. But that it represented a moment when anything seemed possible, when engineers could dream in steel and aluminum, when a small British company could build something that would echo through decades and inspire generations. What's your take on the Black Shadow? Have you ever seen one in person, heard one run, or maybe even been lucky enough to ride one? Drop a comment below and share your Vincent stories. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into motorcycling's most legendary machine, hit that subscribe button for more stories of engineering excellence and mechanical mastery. Until next time, keep the shiny side up and the rubber side down.